Yes, sir.
Perfect, perfect. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Robert White, council member from the District of Columbia and COG Board Chair. I'd like to call the September meeting of the COG Board of Directors to order and thank everyone for joining us virtually for today's meeting. Recognizing that our platform for the meeting is virtual, we request your patience and ask for your microphones to be muted. If you would like to speak, please make sure to unmute your line and then return to mute after you're finished. And please take advantage of the chat box. First, I would like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and then I will provide a reminder of virtual meeting logistics. So I would ask that you join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Proceeding with today's meeting, please note that the meeting's audio and video are being live streamed to the public on the COG website through COG's YouTube account. Before we start, Monica Nunez, who has been monitoring the participants box, will complete a roll call to document your presence at the meeting.
Thank you, Chair. So far from the District of Columbia, I have Chairman Robert White. Is there anyone else present from the district? From the state of Maryland, I have Reuben Collins, Craig Moe, Nancy Navarro, Kate Stewart, and Joy Schaefer. Is there anyone else present from the Maryland jurisdiction? Moving on, from Virginia jurisdictions, I have Justin Wilson, Christian Dorsey, Jeff McKay, Penny Gross, Rodney Lusk, Julie Briskman, Phyllis Randall, Mark Wolf, Daryl Moore, Ann Wheeler, and Andrea Bailey. Is there anyone else from a jurisdiction in Virginia?
David Meyer,
Dave Snyder.
Oh.
Go ahead, David.
David Meyer, City of Fairfax.
David Snyder, City of Falls Church.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David.
Okay, we have a quorum and are good to proceed.
Thank you very much, Monica. Proceeding with the chairman's report, as we all are likely aware, in a few days, we will mark the 2-decade anniversary since the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001. In our region, in the months and years following 9/11, we were fortunate to have area officials step up and build an expansive regional network dedicated to keeping us safe. Throughout this time, COG has helped connect these police chiefs, fire chiefs, emergency managers, health, transportation, water experts, public information officers, and more, ensuring that they have the proper resources, programs, and engagements in place. As risks have changed, the regional committees and processes supporting this work have evolved too. The good news is this is a network that is engaged as ever, and it is shown to provide valuable support to the region's response to COVID-19. So as we reflect on this anniversary, we also want to thank all the women and men involved in our region's emergency management and homeland security work these past 20 years for their service and continued service on behalf of our communities. For more information, please visit COG's website, which is highlighting some of the planning, communications tools, and regional programs that have been established since 9/11. Moving on to our annual meeting, COG's 2021 annual meeting is scheduled to be held in person at 12 noon on December 8th, 2021. These in-person plans are, of course, dependent on the status of COVID, so if things change, you will be updated accordingly. I'm pleased to announce the annual awards will be returning this year with a special update. In remembrance of former Deputy Executive Director Stuart Freudberg, who in his 40 years at COG forged lasting connections with area leaders to create numerous regional partnerships and programs. Cox Partnership Award will be named and presented in his memory. The award recognizes an organization or individual that provided leadership in support of regional policies or programs endorsed by COG. Please take your time to nominate your peers and partner organizations for one of COG's prestigious awards. The nomination form is quick and easy. You can RSVP for the annual meeting and nominate someone for an award by visiting www.mwcog.org/annual meeting. And if you have any questions, please reach out to Pat Warren. Other exciting news, COG is starting a podcast. COG is pleased to announce that it will be launching a new podcast in October, hosted by Robert McCartney, the recently retired senior regional correspondent for the Washington Post. Bob is a trusted journalist who all of us are familiar with, and his 39-year career has earned recognition for his storytelling skills and his deep knowledge of our region. The podcast will cover timely issues and trends, elevate big ideas, and feature constructive conversations focused on shaping a better DMV region. I also want to mention the TPB Roadway Safety Awards. The Transportation Planning Board's Regional Roadway Safety Program is currently open and accepting funding applications until October 12th. The program provides short-term consultant services of up to $60,000 for studies or planning projects and up to $80,000 for design or preliminary engineering projects that address roadway safety issues. The first round of funding was awarded this summer. More info on that, as well as the current application links, are on the COG's homepage. Finally, I want to mention some sad news. Former Laurel City Administrator Bill Goddard passed away last week after a struggle with cancer. This certainly is a tough hit to Laurel, to Maryland, and to the entire region. And wanted to invite our colleague, Mayor Craig Moe of Laurel, to say a couple words if you're willing.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We appreciate that. And if I could, I wrote just a few things down because I didn't want to miss anything about Bill. But Bill was a true public servant that will be missed here in Laurel and, as you said, in the region. Prior to his employment here in the city, he served his country in the United States Navy. And after serving 23 years with the Prince George's County Fire and Rescue Department, he retired as the #2 position as the chief deputy. He also served under the Governor Glendenning administration as the Deputy Secretary of State, and then as the Maryland Transportation Chief of Staff to the Secretary. After state time, Bill was appointed as the fire chief over at the Howard County Fire and Rescue Department, and he also served in several executive level positions. One in particular, which is NAI Michael Company, which is a full service commercial real estate leader in the DMV. Bill's employment started here in the city in 2015 as the city's emergency services coordinator, and then he was appointed as the deputy city administrator in 2016, and in 2018 he was confirmed as Laurel's city administrator. I never thought he would take the position because he's retired several times, but he did come back for me, and I appreciate that. During the pandemic, he worked tirelessly many days and evenings, pretty much alone here at City Hall, always reading the latest on COVID-19, developing policies and practices to better protect our employees and the general public. He advanced Laurel in municipal operations, the employee safety and salary and their benefits. Bill is the reason why we joined the Council of Governments. He felt it was an important organization and that Laurel needed to be a member. And quite frankly, he was right. He loved attending and taking part in the many different committee meetings. Bill was one that consumed many things. He could read numerous documents. He was up to date on every subject. And when you went to meet with him, you better know what you were talking about because he had already done his homework. He loved reading all the different material that COG puts out And we've been able to take a lot of that information to Bill, put that into play here at City Hall. And he loved attending the chief administrative officers meetings as well. Bill was a strong, calm leader. He had a strong, calm leadership style that was effective, and he inspired many here at the City of Laurel. Bill lived each and every day, and that motto we say, in service for others. He will be missed. We do have, if anybody's interested, we have the services that will be on the 17th down in Calvert County. But Mr. Chairman, I appreciate you allowing me to take this opportunity. And Bill loved COG, I can tell you that. And we appreciate the nice letter that we got from the executive director, Chuck. I appreciate that, Bill. Appreciate the many conversations he had with you as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Craig. And I appreciate the words and tribute. Certainly, my thoughts and prayers are with his family and colleagues and neighbors. So thank you again, Craig. We want to turn to agenda item 3, the executive director's report. So I will turn it over to Executive Director Chuck Bean to give his update and executive director's report.
Thank you, Chair White, and thank you, Mayor Mo, for those remarks about Bill. He will be missed. I have 4 staff who will provide 1-minute updates on 4 items. First is Jenny Sheeter, our Principal Health Planner and Staff Convener of the Health Officials Committee and also Committee of State Epidemiologists. And Jenny will discuss some interstate tools to facilitate information sharing.
Great, thank you, Chuck. Yes. So again, Jenny Sheeter, Principal Health Planner, happy to share some of these multi-state COVID projects that we've been working on. So I actually convene state-level epidemiologists every Tuesday from DC, Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania. And we actually had New York jump on the call just yesterday. I've been convening them weekly since June 2020, with the first project being that contact tracing interstate exchange work. I presented on this last year, but this group also came up with a new project of sharing COVID variant information across state lines to help out with epi research and investigations. So what we do, COG develops a phylogenetic tree every week. So what that essentially means is that we visually depict the cases, the links between the cases, based on the number of mutations. And what EPIs can do with this, they can help identify and track any variants of concern across state lines. So this is first in the nation to be able to do a project like this. We're super excited about it. We started off with a DMV tree, and we have since expanded the tree to also include data from Pennsylvania and New York as well. So we also have to give a shout out to our foundations who are helping support this work. We have Care First, Blue Cross Blue Shield, De Beaumont Foundation, the Morris and Gwendolyn K. Fritz Foundation, the Northern Virginia Health Foundation, and the Healthcare Initiative Foundation. So big shout out to the foundations for helping support this regional variant work. We also have Dr. Patrick Edeme, who is going to be later on this agenda. He'll provide additional details on this project, and happy to have him as he has been a real leader of getting this off the ground. But with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Chuck.
Thank you, Jenny. And next up is Hilary Chapman, our Housing and Homelessness Lead and Staff Convener of the Housing Directors and the Homeless Services Committee. Hilary.
Thanks, Chuck, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm pleased to share an update on the Homeless Services Committee's Regional Racial Equity Systems Analysis. So this is a year-long collaboration, which is reviewing each of the 9 participating jurisdictions or continuum of care operations and providing guidance on how to center racial equity in homeless services systems response. We have an important meeting taking place this Friday, September 10th, which is the kickoff for the Racial Equity Action Council. The council is comprised of 3 to 5 representatives of local government leadership, frontline staff, and people with lived expertise from each COC, which will be participating and will serve as a key liaison between COG's Homeless Services Committee, the Continuum of Care, and the consultant project team. We'll be holding stakeholder listening sessions later this fall, which will complement the quantitative data analysis, which is also underway right now. The selected consultant we're working with is C4 Innovations, known nationally for their Spark study of research into racial equity and homelessness. And the final deliverable will be a set of concrete recommendations for actions that each jurisdiction can take at a local level and collectively as a region to create a more racially equitable approach to ending the experience of homelessness. So please stay tuned. Thank you.
Thank you, Hilary. And next up is Monica Beruti Nunez, who, among other things, is the staff convener of the Regional Chief Equity Officers Committee and will highlight the next regional racial equity cohort. Monica.
Thank you, Chuck. We're excited to be launching the next regional cohort with the Government Alliance on Race and Equity. It is a regional racial equity learning cohort that will start in a couple of weeks and span over the next 10 months. There are 12 local governments that will be sending teams of staff to participate along with a COG staff team. And throughout the process, they will be learning educational tools and implementation tools to help advance racial equity within government programs and policies, and developing racial equity action plans for each government. So we're excited to be working alongside the Government Alliance on Race and Equity and the jurisdictions over the next 10 months.
Thank you, Monica. The next one is more internal to COG. Next is Lionel Bernard, COG's Information Technology Director, who will highlight a cybersecurity audit of COG's IT system. Lionel.
Thanks, Chuck, and good afternoon, directors. COG's IT infrastructure is currently undergoing a comprehensive cybersecurity audit. This is COG's first cybersecurity audit. The audit is being done by Process Improvement Achievers, or PIA. PIA is a Baltimore-based cybersecurity consulting firm with extensive experience in performing cyber audits for federal agencies and corporations. COG's cyber audit began on July 12th and will conclude later this month. The goal of the cyber audit is to evaluate the resiliency of COG's IT infrastructure against cyber threats such as ransomware and other cyber attacks. The audit is expected to conclude with a report of findings and recommendations. We will develop 30, 60, and 90-day remediation plans to address those findings and recommendations. I thank you. Back to you, Chuck.
Thank you, Lionel. I know we want to hit our mark for item 7 at 12:20, so that concludes my remarks. Happy to answer questions, probably in this case offline. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you so much, Chuck. Yeah, we will keep pushing through the rest of the agenda items to get back on track. Item 4, amendments to the agenda. Are there any amendments to today's agenda? Seeing and hearing none, we will move right into item 5, approval of minutes from the June 9th, 2021 meeting. Is there a motion and a second to approve the minutes from the June 9th board meeting?
Penny Gross moves approval.
Christian Dorsey seconds.
Wonderful. With that, let me ask this, are there any abstentions or nay votes? Hearing none, the motion passes. Moving to agenda item 6, the consent agenda. We have 4 resolutions on the consent agenda today regarding several contracts of service to local agencies and an administrative policy update to Cox pension plan. You can find these on page 15 of your board packet. Is there a motion and a second to approve these consent agendas?
Penny Gross moves approval.
Christian Dorsey seconds.
Wonderful. We have a motion and a second. Are there any nay votes or abstentions? Hearing none, the motion passes, which brings us to agenda item 7, briefing from Federal Transit Administration Administrator Fernandez. For agenda item 7, I would like to welcome FTA Administrator Nuria Fernandez. Ms. Fernandez will brief us on FTA's priorities, including equity considerations and optimizing land use around transit stations. Administrator Fernandez, welcome, and I will turn it over to you now. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and directors of the board, for inviting me to join you at your meeting today. On behalf of Secretary Pete Buttigieg and the Biden-Harris administration, I really appreciate this opportunity to share with you the priorities that we are pursuing. I also want to recognize FTA Region 3 Administrator Terry Garcia Cruz and her team, who lead our federal transit program in your region. So as you know, this is a pivotal time for our nation's public transportation systems. Last month, when the Senate passed the Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act, it included $550 billion in new federal investment for America's infrastructure, and the federal transit systems will receive more than $90 billion in guaranteed funding, the most significant federal support for transit in our nation's history. The proposed funding is not just an abstract number. It will improve people's lives in every community throughout the country. And that transformation is why the U.S. Department of Transportation and FTA are focused on providing support for the kind of regional transportation planning and well thought out transit projects and initiatives we're seeing you coordinate in the Washington metro region. We hope that the infrastructure bill will soon provide a new source of funding so that it can speed up transit expansion and improve the state of good repair for transit agencies in the Washington region, as well as throughout the country. The success of the transportation system is critical to the economic health and sustainability and the future growth of the DC region. So, and your work really is vital to ensuring that transit systems in Maryland and Northern Virginia and the district continue to address the needs for everyone, from the transit bus rider in Frederick County to a daily metro commuter in Northwest DC to a cyclist in Manassas, and everyone in between, in this very bustling region that is home to more than 20 jurisdictions. So we appreciate COG's approach to planning in the region that has its share of complex challenges, including managing traffic congestion and addressing air quality concerns. And there's a shortage of affordable housing as well. So in fact, your responsibilities continue to grow as the role of the MPOs is expanding in response to our changing world. And we look to you as our regional partners to building thriving communities that will attract good jobs and ensure efficient and accessible public transportation. And beyond that, we expect MPOs to help tackle climate change and prioritize equity so that no one is left behind and out of the opportunities. It is a new era. New technologies are transforming transportation. We have opportunities we have never had before to improve safety, accessibility, and equity, and to drive economic development and combat climate change. Your well-coordinated regional transportation network is helping address those issues and many more. The COG takes its responsibility to shape the sustainable growth of the region, a region with 5.5 million residents and one of the largest economies, and to take it very seriously. The Biden-Harris administration is committed to equity and improving access to transit for everyone. And as we want to take this opportunity to commend the work that you all are doing to focus growth around the 200 high-capacity transit stations areas, and to support the economic development and also to provide housing. And this is particularly important as more than 2 million more people are expected to move to this region in the next 30 years. So in addition to your work to support investment in equity emphasis areas across the region, it dovetails with the administration's focus on equity in our transportation systems. So having emphasis areas will be important for future decisions related to transportation, but also for land use and education here in the DC region. So as you all know very well, part of the solution to achieving equity is creating more transit-oriented development, which can help create access to transit. And it is by taking a regional approach, we can consider not only where to place and replace roads and transit bus routes and rail lines, but also how to pass land use planning and zoning laws favorable to transit-oriented development, while we continue to support efforts to maintain and grow affordable housing. In fact, COG's focus on transit-oriented development, along with promoting these equity emphasis areas, provides the basis for jurisdictions to maximize development and to be able to bring the type of planning around high capacity transit stations and to make it equitable throughout the Washington region. When government-owned land is involved, especially near transit investments like stations and corridors, it is really critical to work with the private sector to ensure that viable amounts of housing are provided to meet housing affordability and needs at all levels. For example, WMATA is working with a regional employer to construct more than 1,000 new housing units for middle and low-income residents near metro stations. And that's the kind of transit-oriented development which will increase opportunities for more people to live in sustainable, connected communities near transit, and also to ensure that even those not earning at the top of their field can still find a good place to live. Our joint development program at FTA allows transit agencies to integrate land with public and private investments. Another WMATA example is its partnership with FTA in joint development project that's going to redevelop 5 acres into a mixed-use site, including 700 homes and community-focused retail. The new development will be right next to the West Hyattsville Metro Station. And this joint development project leverages our federal investment by increasing access to transit, both bus and rail, for residents in Prince George's County. Fairfax County's proposed BRT system along Richmond Highway also represents a great opportunity for coordinated land use around future station areas while serving the needs of low-income and underserved populations within the region. So working to determine appropriate land uses now is critical for preserving equity, as those decisions and their nexus to transit will continue to forge a prosperous and still more equitable region. And of course, any impact we can make to reduce driving will help reduce the greenhouse gases that contribute to climate change. Rare weather events now impact communities with record frequency. The devastating loss of life and paralyzing damage from Hurricane Ida made headlines. And we all saw pictures of stranded residents in Louisiana, gushing geysers in the New York subway, highways turned to rivers and floating houses. Public transportation will be a big part of the solution, and I am so pleased the pending infrastructure legislation includes funding dedicated to zero-emission vehicles. So as we continue to switch from fossil fuels to electric or hydrogen-based, we will reduce the greenhouse gas emissions that play such a big role in our planet's rising temperatures. Working with support from FTA's Bus and Bus Facilities Grant Program, Montgomery County is taking a positive step forward with its plans to convert its ride-on buses from diesel to electric, with 14 to hit the road by 2022. And other agencies in the region are also on board, including the District Department of Transportation, which is electrifying the circulator, and Dash in Alexandria, Virginia, which should have about 10 electric buses by this winter. FTA continues to support the Washington, D.C. region as it expands its electric fleet and finding ways to support regional climate change goals. I want to remind everyone that we provide federal support for much of this. Many of the programs at the US DOT are turning the administration's commitment to equity into practice. Along with FTA's Capital Investment Grants Program, the department's Rebuilding America's Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity, which stands for RAISE, provides funding for regionally significant capital and planning projects. In fact, up to $30 million of the fiscal year 21 RAISE funding will be awarded to planning grants, including at least $10 million to areas of persistent poverty. And MPOs are among the eligible applicants. An extensive transit network really creates a better connections to opportunities. I know we all know this, and we should try to open those opportunities for everyone who calls DC region home. And we want to make sure that regardless of how you travel, everyone has an equal shot at getting where they need to go. So I really appreciate having time with you today, and I look forward and welcome your questions.
Thank you very much, Administrator Fernandez. The Executive Committee has put together 3 questions for you today. So the first one is the FTA plays a major role in funding commuter rail, which is our region's our region is really reimagining to run more effectively, more efficiently, and all-day rail service. COG recently completed a MARC VRE ridership study, and we're also recently have joined the Greater Washington Partnership's Regional Rail Vision effort that aims to knit together the region's rail plans and systems to allow for a more competitive and successful network over the next 25 years. As the lead agency for commuter rail in the country, how is FTA reimagining its role and possibly its policies and programs to support the transition from commuter rail to regional rail?
Well, that's a great question. And let me start by saying that the administration is very supportive of all forms of public transit. Commuter railroads certainly play an important and growing role in public transportation across the nation. And our commuter rail lines contribute to improve mobility in urban areas. But they also spur economic development. They create jobs, which, as you know, is a top priority for this administration. So going back to 2009, USDOT has provided approximately $4 billion to construct 12 new or expanded commuter rail lines throughout the US. And the total cost of those projects is about $9 billion. The funding sources that have been used are as I mentioned before, the Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity, which is the RACE program today, but that program was called initially TIGER. Many of you may be familiar with that moniker. It's the Transportation Investments Generating Economic Recovery. And then it was modified to Better Utilizing Investments to Leverage Development, the BUILD program. But that program continues because it has demonstrated its value. Another funding source is the FTA's Capital Investment Grants Program, known as SIG. And we also have the Urbanized Area, the Section 5307 formula funds. And then there are colleagues on the highway side, the Federal Highway Flex Funding, which includes the congestion mitigation and air quality funds. Let me just share an example. Trinity Metro in Fort Worth, Texas, built a commuter rail line between downtown Fort Worth and the Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport that began service January of 2019. It's about 27-mile commuter rail line. It serves 3 high-capacity centers, downtown Fort Worth, the city of Grapevine, and the airport. And it connects to other transportation services in the area, including the Dallas Area Rapid Transit Light Rail Systems, Amtrak, Trinity Railway Express, and the Trinity Metro Bus System. So this commuter rail line had such a tremendous impact in the Dallas-Fort Worth region. FDA supported it with this $1 billion commuter project with a $499 million capital investment New Starts grant. So I want to encourage all the directors of COG to learn from the planning, design, and construction of the 12 successful commuter rail lines across the country as you continue your efforts to streamline your commuter rail system in this region and to reimagine that commuter rail operating outside of just commute peak periods. And we also look forward to discussing how we can support COG's regional planning efforts. It's very important to the region, is important to the Federal Transit Administration and USDOT.
Thank you. And we appreciate the attention to our region's transportation networks. For the next question, I want to turn it over to Vice Chair Christian Dorsey.
Thank you, Chair White, and thank you, Administrator Fernandez, for joining us today and for the presentation. And very much appreciated your talking about the RACE grants. And I was wondering, as our region really looks at addressing climate change, we've zeroed in on zero emission vehicles as a key solution. And I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit more about how FTA can provide support and guidance as we think about the infrastructure, the energy infrastructure needed to support zero emissions vehicles as part of our transit solution. And if you could speak with any specificity about, electric grid considerations for battery powered EVs or even for hydrogen fuel cell EVs, it would be greatly appreciated. Thanks.
Yes, another great question. As you all may know, and following the bipartisan infrastructure bill, that the emphasis on electric low or no emission technology is very prevalent given the challenges that as a nation, as a world, we're experiencing with climate change. So the industry itself is leading a lot of the efforts on reducing emissions to help combat climate change, and public transportation is at the forefront. You reference the electric vehicles, and I can say that our commitment to working with all of you, and particularly in this region, is to not only make sure that everyone is aware of all of the funding sources that we've been putting out. We have had I think that this was the third go around on the low and no emission discretionary program, so that transit agencies could apply and receive funding as they start to plan and then transition their fleet from the fossil fuel dependency from diesel buses to electric or other low emission technology. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act includes, there's 90 billion in funding, and there's going to be a significant opportunity to implement infrastructure that's cleaner and greener, for advanced vehicles that will improve the urban air quality and environmental justice, which is another emphasis of the transition to low or no emission, and is to ensure that not only are we not impacting the climate, but that those who are being exposed to the to fumes from diesel and other noxious chemicals, we can eliminate or eradicate that, because it's impacting many communities, and we've noticed that it's impacting particularly communities with individuals of low income and Black and brown communities throughout the country. Battery electric buses, hydrogen fuel cell buses, and all kinds of related infrastructure can be considered as an eligible expense under many of our current capital programs. And we're playing a significant role in ensuring that we're putting out information, and there's funding available for training, for planning, as transit agencies start to think about and or build upon their fleet transitions to a low or no emission type of technology. So we're really counting and looking forward to engaging more in this area, and in particular, if there is any questions, if there's any particular technology that is of interest, my team and I are available to dive further into those discussions. Just thinking back 5 years ago, since 2016, we've provided about $400 million to state and local governments so they can purchase or lease zero or low emission transit buses, and to also fund any type of infrastructure that is necessary to operate the new technologies. Once the bid is enacted, we are really looking to see an increase in funding that is going to help with the transitioning to a green fleet. And we look forward to seeing applications from this region as it also plans in improving the environment and improving the availability of better and high quality transit technology to operate within its communities.
Thank you.
Thank you, Administrator. And final questions from our other Vice Chair, Kate Stewart, who is the Mayor of Tacoma Park, Maryland.
Great. Thank you, Chair, and thank you so much for this conversation today. It's been a terrific opportunity for all of us. So my question has to do with bus rapid transit. What potential does FTA see for major bus rapid transit systems, and how does federal support for BRT fit into the FTA's plans for the next few years?
Thank you for your question. The FTA works with transit agencies and local communities nationwide to help support the design, construction, operation of transit projects that work and are the best for their communities. Among them, there's an increased popularity on bus rapid transit systems. So the BRT systems, really what they do is they help create that equitable access. They often use energy efficient buses that also help take cars off the road and reduce greenhouse gases. And they can do all of this faster and with less cost than a rail-based transit solution, which is also very popular with communities. You know, for several decades now, the FTA has been funding bus rapid transit projects to the tune of, since back in the 70s, to about 3.1 billion that have gone to 63 BRT projects nationwide. 55 of those BRT projects have received FTA grant awards starting in the 2000s. And many of these BRT systems are running in our largest cities, which it's very competitive. Approximately 60% of these projects have been funded in just the past decade alone. So there's this major emphasis on bringing solutions to communities that are rubber tire, that provide that flexibility by identifying the routes where there is the need to introduce such type of technology that will operate with a connection to systems, have the signal communications and signal capacity for preemptions, and providing that easy ride in and out. There are 10 communities that have come back to FTA at least twice seeking federal funding so that they can build additional BRT lines and creating a very robust network of BRT systems. And some of those, I'll just mention a few examples. The LAMTA in California, we've got similar in Jacksonville, Grand Rapids, Kansas City, Reno, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Houston, El Paso, and Seattle. So it is a movement, and we encourage it. We provide technical assistance and look forward to working again with all of you as you're thinking through what the best solutions for this region, and within the region, each community is going to be. The future is bright, and we want all of us to be part of it.
Administrator Fernandez, thank you so much for being with us today. Your insights into the FTA, what you all are doing, and how we can partner and work with you are very insightful. So we're excited about the road ahead, the rail ahead, and look forward to working with you. So thank you again for joining us.
Thanks for your invitation, and have a great day.
You too. That was a wonderful conversation, really kind of continuing along the very similar lines, but transitioning somewhat to the COG leadership retreat outcomes and next steps. We're going to now take a look at prioritizing high capacity transit areas and equity emphasis areas. So as we turn to agenda item 8, I welcome High Capacity Transit and Equity Emphasis Areas Task Force Chair Phyllis Randall, along with Executive Director Chuck Bean and Deputy Executive Director of Metropolitan Planning, Kanti Srikanth, to brief us on the outcomes of COG's annual leadership retreat in July and the work of the High Capacity Transit and Equity Emphasis Areas Task Force.
I can't believe you're making me go after Administrator Fernandez. That is just not fair. And she literally, I'm like marking things off my list that I was going to talk about as she's talking. So this will be a lot more brief than it would have otherwise been. But anyway, all of you remember that during the COG retreat, we had the breakout sessions where we discussed and presented our ideals on the high capacity transit areas and the equity emphasis area. We, of course, talked about equity, the environment, land management, land use, attainable housing among those areas. And using all that, the High Capacity Transit and Equity Emphasis Committee tried to incorporate some of the following things that were discussed. And so we have 2 resolutions. If we can maybe put the first resolution up, if that can happen, the first resolution was the equity resolution endorsing equity emphasis areas as a key planning concept and tool to inform decision making. So when the committee met, we did a draft on that. Do we not have the draft available to be put up on the screen? Is that not available? I know it was sent to everyone, but is the draft not available to put on the screen? If so, that'd be helpful. If not, then you all received it in your emails. And so what I'd like to say is that the committee met and we we went through the staff put together a first run at the draft, and there we go. The committee met and went through it. And I will say that I think it was really good work done by the staff as we look at this first resolution. Actually, I'm looking at the endorsing equity emphasis areas first, but I can go to this one first. That's fine. I can do whatever you all need me to do. So just put one of them up and I can talk because I'm ready to talk about either one. By the way, hi Beverly, how are you? So, okay. All right. So I actually, again, I know you all have read them already, so I'm not going to read them to you because we're all adults and we have this already, but I actually believe that the 1, 2, 3, the fourth and fifth, whereas on this resolution is so instructive to talking about what we're trying to do, because the fourth and fifth whereas talks about how many areas in the high capacity transit areas are areas of the equity emphasis and why we are doing what we are doing. So what I thought we would do today is, again, assuming all of you read this resolutions, have everybody look over the resolutions. If you have any thoughts, any ideas, anything you think the committee got wrong, got right, to say that to us now. Or if you want to just send me or any of the board, of the committee, or any of the Cox staff your ideas. It really, I believe, I went to this one first because I believe it really encompassed so much of what we were saying. We talked about equity being, the equity emphasis areas being somewhere we have to focus on jobs, have to focus on attainable housing, the fact that the transit is a fairness and equity issue for so many reasons. And again, bullets 4, whereas is 4 and 5 really get down to the meat of the numbers. And then if you go to the now therefore be it resolved area, it just talked about the fact that the equity emphasis areas should be prioritized for special consideration as we do regional planning, as we do local planning, as we make decisions to further the region forward vision. That we want to look at all these things through an equity lens. We want to have an accessible, livable, sustainable, prosperous entire region, and you do not do that if you don't have a discussion about equity and equity as it relates to especially as we have this discussion as it relates to transit. And so we are asking in the fourth, whereas for local governments to consider adopting resolutions to prioritizing equity emphasis areas within their jurisdictions. I know some jurisdictions are already starting to work on that. Some are not. Some are just starting to have these kind of uncomfortable but important, courageous conversations. So that's really the ask out of this resolution, is that the jurisdictions consider adopting the areas. So Conti or Chuck, did you have anything you wanted to add before we do the next resolution?
I'm happy to do a 3-minute slide deck just to level set the why and the map and the implications.
Yeah, let's do that. That's fine.
Be desired, Chair Mendel.
Okay.
I think Monica, if you could tee up that slide deck and go with the equity emphasis areas. Before the retreat and at the retreat, we spent a lot of time digging into the details, why this planning framework is important, where the census tracts are, and how to use these as a tool to weave in equity throughout all of our work. And just to echo Chair Randall, on page 38 of the board packet is a memo and a regional map. Page 40 is the methodology, and page 42 has a table about the equity emphasis areas within each jurisdiction. So just 3 slides. Begins with the resolution by this board in July 2020, which set the course that equity will be woven into all of our analysis analyses, all that we do. And on the scale of regional planning, I think equity emphasis areas do just that. And next slide. Reminder that we analyzed the region's 1,200 plus census tracts in order to pinpoint locations in the region with concentrations of low income and or racial or ethnic minorities. This is the federal language, or communities of color. 350 of these census tracts were identified. And while these census tracts cover only 10% of the region's landmass, these communities support about 30% of the region's population. And these equity emphasis areas are in every major jurisdiction. That said, there are concentrations of equity emphasis areas in Maryland, 103 are in Prince George's, and 97 of the 350 are in the District of Columbia with concentrations on the east side. Next slide. Analysis of equity emphasis areas can be woven into all our work, especially regional spatial analysis. Provides us a powerful tool to examine connectivity to high capacity transit station areas, for example. I think the vision is that the new investments, as new investments are considered, while HCTs will be considered as areas targeted for growth and development, a standard question will be how are equity emphasis areas connected to these plans? I guess one example that comes to mind is as we're collectively thinking about optimizing land use and transit investments around the Route 1 corridor, National Landing with WMATA, VRE, BRT, decision makers will also ask how are equity emphasis area census tracts part of that plan. So the green is that this vision will be woven throughout, not just transportation, which is the green slice, but also planning and programming, the blue slice, and then most explicitly in the orange slice where these planning disciplines are spelled out. So Chair Randall, we've done important work over the past few years, epitomized by the health officer's uneven opportunities report in 2018. Extending to the work within TPP where EEAs were developed and codified. But with the board's action on these expected next month, we'll take the next step and institutionalize these efforts within our regional plans. So Monica, you can take down the slide deck and I'll turn it back to Chair Randall for any conversation or to transition to high capacity transit station areas.
Or if Conti had anything he wanted to add, does Conti have something he wanted to add?
Thank you, Ms. Randall. Nothing to add on the equity emphasis areas other than to note and emphasize what Administrator Fernandez and you and Chuck have said. There are multiple planning constructs and considerations that equity emphasis areas can lend itself to, whether we are talking about transportation, healthcare, education, economic opportunities. In all aspects of regional planning, this is a good construct that can be applied. There are opportunities to enhance and build on this work. So COG's endorsement will certainly put this construct onto the planning radar. Thanks.
Thanks. So the next resolution we had was resolution endorsing high capacity transit station areas as a key planning concept and tool to inform decision making and action. So if we could put that resolution up, I'd appreciate it. And again, I don't need to read the resolution or anything. You've had it already and you can see it, but I did want to highlight especially two of the whereases, the third one and the fifth one. The third whereas, in my opinion, kind of states what we're trying to do. We want to talk about sustainable housing as it relates to climate change, accessibility, and all the things that we've discussed in the region. And then number 5 is really, really important. And the numbers I thought in number 5 were significantly important. So I will go on and just read that one. That says, whereas in 2019, the COG board adopted regional housing amount accessibility and affordability targeting, stating that at least 320,000 housing units should be added in the region by 2030, with at least 75% in the regional activity centers near high capacity transit areas, and 75% of those being accessible to low or middle income housing. We spent some time on that whereas, because I think it just says so much, and it speaks to what we have to do as a region, that this is not about one jurisdiction adding homes and another one not adding homes, because of course you know, you have some jurisdictions that will have less NIMBYism and some that will have more NIMBYism. And so it's sometimes hard to have these discussions, to have these really important conversations about why we need accessible, attainable, affordable workforce housing, veterans housing, senior income house, senior housing, disability housing, all of it. They're incredibly important conversations to have, and about the AMIs. But I really believe that whereas explained it so well that we need to have 320,000 new homes, 75% of those should be in our high transit area, and 75 of those should be accessible homes. And so I just thought that was that we could have had almost a resolution with that whereas alone, because it was just so important. And then if you again go to the therefore be it resolved, we talked about the fact that that high capacity transit areas should be given special consideration as jurisdictions start doing their planning and programming. I will say that my friend Jeff McKay, Chairman McKay, has just led the region, I believe, in talking about these issues and done really, really great work. When I think about just the Reston Town Center alone and how well planned out that was, with the exception of maybe needing more accessible, affordable homes, did such a good job in that area. And the fact that these areas are multi-yeared planning efforts. And so when you do a plan, you think about, you know, what's going to be your interim use, and that might be a surface parking lot. And later on, that surface parking lot will become high-rise housing with a parking garage. And so thinking about how to do this starts at the planning stage and starts years and years before. And again, the last whereas was local governments should commit to provide safe and convenient walk, bike, and micro transit access to and from high capacity transit areas, and make transit a more viable mode of travel. So in other words, it's, you know, simply said, we can use less cars and do more transit. And of course, that doesn't mean that every place can do that, because, you know, Western Loudoun County or parts of Prince William County, you can't do transit. But where we can do it, we should do it. And it's, you know, equity issue, environmental issue, the safety issue, the whole nine, all of it. And so, so those are the two things we talked about on that. And again, if anyone has any discussions or thoughts that they want to say something different in the resolutions, these won't be voted on and approved to next time, to our next COG meeting. So this is for us just to go over and look at the wording on these resolutions to date. And so one more time, I will pass it back to Chuck.
Thank you, Chair Rendell. I think it's your preference here to engage other task force members for comments. Conti's also ready to do a 3-minute version of high capacity transit station areas.
I think we should do that first. I think we should do that first, and then we'll have discussions.
Good. I think Monica, if you could bring up that slide deck, and Conti, if you could give us some reminders of the whys and details of high capacity transit station areas from now to 2030.
Certainly, Chuck. Thank you, Ms. Randall. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Well, I cannot do full justice to recap the discussions you all had during the COG leadership retreat. That was really very insightful. I'll try to provide a brief recap on how the discussions has really brought together multiple regional priorities, as Ms. Randall was just alluding to, into a unified regional planning construct. Next slide. The Region Forward document, in my opinion, encapsulates the broad array of priorities this board has adopted. It does so very well under 4 pillars: accessibility, livability, sustainability, and prosperity. And last year, you all enhanced this in a very important way by weaving equity into all of these 4 priorities. So we acknowledge that a number of projects, programs, and policies are being implemented locally and regionally to ensure equitable access, which would facilitate good living in a sustainable manner, which would lead to the collective prosperity. The region has adopted various goals within these broad pillars of growth. And transit-oriented communities throughout the region, building transit-oriented communities is seen as a multi-sectoral strategy that would advance a number of these goals, including housing, transportation, and climate change. Next slide. So what does a successful, the previous one, please? What does a successful transit-oriented community look like, and what does it do? It creates opportunities across a number of different sectors, and each of which advances our regional goals. For example, a key element of equitable transit-oriented community is housing that is affordable to all income levels and all family sizes. And that is part of our housing and equity goal. A successful transit-oriented communities will have mixed land use that includes jobs, housing, healthcare, food, and other commercial amenities, which is part of our livability goal. An effective transit-oriented community also provides alternative ways to travel and access economic opportunities for our living, and in a way that is more affordable than owning personal automobiles. And these are our transportation and accessibility goals. And then finally, this reduced dependency on auto travel and increased transit travel helps reduce burning fossil fuel, which helps reduce emissions and greenhouse gases, which are part of our climate change goals. So transit-oriented community brings all of these diverse goals together in a unified implementation strategy. Next slide, please. So this overarching theme that you all discussed during the retreat, it was not an abstract discussion from my vantage point. Rather, the discussion had some specificity. It specifically looked at the geographic locations of the high-capacity transit stations in our region by 2030. There was specificity with regard to the potential of these high-capacity transit station areas to accommodate the future growth, and importantly, in recognizing how this approach to transit-oriented communities could influence growth in the region by bringing together two other planning constructs that you all have adopted, and that is regional activity centers and equity emphasis areas. Next slide, please. So the draft resolution that you have today in front of you represents this unifying planning construct that we trust reflects the general sense of discussions that you all had at the retreat. The resolution notes that we would individually and collectively prioritize planning and programming decisions that would advance transit-oriented communities. The resolution notes that we would commit to optimize the land use mix around these high-capacity transit stations and to make sure that they are not only of mixed use, but also of mixed income. And that we would actively promote transportation investments that would improve walk and bike and micro transit access to these stations, and also that would connect the transit-oriented communities together through the National Capital Trail Network. So those are the four broad commitments that this resolution captures, and I hope that reflects the general sense that came out of your discussions. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Ms. Rand.
Thank you. So to the committee members, I can't actually see my whole screen right now, so I can't see everybody on the screen. So you know what, I'm just going to say if any committee members want to say something at this time, they should, because I cannot see everybody on my screen. So just kind of call out.
Yeah, this is Nancy Navarro from Montgomery County. I just really want to express my appreciation for this exercise. I think it's very important. It is so critical that as a region, we rely on a general framework. I think that will be helpful for our individual jurisdictions. That is so true that, you know, each of our jurisdictions have a different sort of characteristic and ethos and reality on the ground. But these particular standards, this framework, this vision, really, I think, applies nicely and then helps us as a region. And I particularly really like the way we frame the equity emphasis areas to include that word of, prosperity there up front. It is very important because, I've been engaged in conversations with, this whole notion of land use planning, where sometimes we tend to go in the route of thinking that equity only means, low income, subsidies, things of that nature. We forget that in reality, this is about prosperity, and that in some of these particular geographic areas, we need to focus on bringing jobs, bringing, companies, bringing that type of economic amenity, and not necessarily continue to concentrate, let's say, affordable housing without those amenities. And so again, I think this gives us a nice blueprint to go back to our jurisdictions and remind ourselves of what exactly is the ultimate goal. Because if not, we might inadvertently perpetuate some of those disparities if we don't focus on that balance of bringing, jobs and amenities and opportunities to those areas. So this is very wonderful, really wonderful conversation. So aligned with the presentation from the FDA administrator, and I look forward to each of us going back to our jurisdictions and adopting these resolutions and using this as a guide. And thank you so much, Ms. Randall, for her guidance throughout this process.
And Ms. Novato, I will say I completely agree. And I think sometimes you said it 3 times, which tells me how important it was to go back to our jurisdictions and have these conversations. In Loudoun, we have a regional readout every meeting. We have a point of a meeting, we do regional readout. So all the things we've done in regional, state, or national meetings, we talk about. And Ms. Brixman and I always talk about COG. And so tonight I will talk about this. And so it's really important to take this, because if we do all this work, but we don't go back and take it back, then we kind of have, what do we do it for? So thank you so much for those comments. Mr. Mendelson, did you have anything you want to say?
No, I'm just listening.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Dorsey
Yeah.
has his hand up.
Okay, Mr. Dorsey?
Thank you very much, Task Force Chair Randall. And I really want to pick up where you and Councilmember Navarro just left off. We've been wrestling with trying to take these big plans that have come out of COG and all of this really substantive work and make sure that it not only has an outlet in the jurisdictions, but is clearly defined for the jurisdictions so that it's not so ethereal. And, we certainly don't want, given the work that goes into this, we never want anyone believing that our work here at COG is performative or just designed to virtue signal. So this is really the framework where we can begin taking these complex concepts and plans and putting them into actual action to be delivered, because that's really ultimately why we all get up in the morning and why we all convene not only once monthly, but during these task forces. So I'd just like to thank you for your leadership and staff for the work to help us move towards bringing high concepts into concrete action.
Wonderful, thank you. Any other task force members? Okay, so as I said, we will vote on this next on the resolutions next month, and I'm sure everyone will have taken them and had some kind of at least some conversation with their jurisdictions and their bodies before then. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you so much, and I will give the meeting back to you, sir.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate yours and everyone else's hard work toward this issue. I do want to offer a couple minutes of opportunity for people to ask questions. Let me kick it off with one. You've mentioned multiple times the importance of starting to have these conversations around equity emphasis area in our jurisdictions, and was wondering if, with respect to resolutions, do you know, or does anyone from COG know, if any of the local jurisdictions have moved forward far enough on equity emphasis area resolutions that we might be able to distribute something that could be viewed as a template or a starting point for other jurisdictions?
I don't know, but this is something that Ms. Brixman and I have talked about at length, and I would be, if no one else has, I think she and I would be happy to maybe start tackling this. I'm speaking for Ms. Brixman, but we would be able to start doing that with and the staff in Loudoun County.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Absolutely.
Great. Are there other questions?
This is Penny Gross. I have an observation, if I may. When I talk to builders, they are constantly telling me that they need to be able to make a certain amount of there's a break point when you build. And one of the challenges that I think we will have, policy is great, but the actual turning into action, we need to have conversations with the building community, because if they're not willing, we can put all kinds of incentives and all kinds of policies in place. If they're not willing to bite at that, then it's just words on paper. And so I'm wondering if in the discussion, which I was really sorry I missed at the retreat, was there any discussion about involving our building community, the Northern Virginia Building Industry Association and so forth, in this discussion? Because otherwise we will do as we have had, many times. You've got a great plan and it's sitting there on the shelf forever because nobody is building to it.
Mr. Chairman, may I take that question?
Please do.
So, Ms. Gross, I think that's such a good point. I will say that as we have started to talk about this in Loudoun, we have started talking to our NBBIA, but also to our business community, who has made the point many times that accessible housing is for workforce, and it is often our firefighters and our police officers and our teachers and our nurses and our wait staff. In addition, the philanthropic communities who have been really much more part of this discussion, I think, in the past years than they ever have before. They realize that if they're trying to do their work in the area of nonprofits, they have to have people live places also. So we've pulled in that community to start to have the discussions as well. So I think that, and of course the grant making community, we've had many discussions around why do all accessible or affordable apartment rentals have to be in a LIHTC funded building, and why can't they be more dispersed throughout the community? And so the grant making community, which is a state issue, so maybe Mr. Barker would be down there talking to you this year. And so there's not, the building community, we have a couple of developments in Loudoun County where we have up to 50% of the homes that we built for rental are accessible or affordable. It was hard to get there, and it took like a lot of planning, but we do have them. But we did involve business community, the nonprofit community, the grant making community, the developing community. It's really an all-in effort. And lastly, I will say that, and I forgot the acronym for HAND, they've done a lot of work on how to talk to your community about accessible and affordable housing and how that should sound. And I've taken myself to a couple of trainings just to find out, am I saying the right words? How am I partnering with people enough? And I have used some of the tools that they've given me, and it really has been really helpful. You are on mute, Ms. Gross.
I think this might be an opportunity for COG to convene, building groups from around the region, building and the various groups that you had mentioned, because I think we need to hear from this together. And that might be a great opportunity for COG to, again, take the lead on a number of levels, not just on the policy, but on how we actually get the bricks and mortar built.
Thank you. Does anyone from the COG team have any comments on Ms. Gross's question?
Yeah, thank you. I think that ecosystem of partners that Supervisor Gross is talking about, one is HAND that Chair Randall mentioned. The other is Urban Land Institute that's been a close partner with us. We've done several technical assistance projects with ULI over the years, and I think that kind of on the ground technical assistance promoting housing affordability, particularly proximate to transit, proximate to equity emphasis areas. And I think many of you know that the current executive director of ULI is going to WMATA to be their head of real estate, position that was occupied by Nina Albert, now with charge of public buildings for GSA. On the broader level with the business community beyond developers, we have lots of engagement with Connected DMV, and that's also involved the economic development directors from throughout the region. I'm expecting that to provide kind of a mega playbook regarding these issues in Greater Washington Partnership's work. I think ultimately some technical assistance that can prove and advance projects on the ground is what we need, and we will explore that and come back to the board on that particular idea next month.
Thank you. Are there additional questions? I see Ms. Bailey.
Thank you,
And
Mr.
Ms.
Chairman.
Navarro will be next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just, not to belabor the point, just want to echo what Supervisor Gross has just said. I mean, going back to what Chair Randall was saying, it takes a long time. And so the education of really helping people to understand this so that we can get on with the intentionality of this is very important to arm us. So I echo what she has said. We just really need to, the education piece is very important. We can embrace it, but once we embrace it, how do we help people to understand? So I think that's very key. So not to belabor the point, I just wanted to add that comment.
Thank you. Ms. Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I absolutely want to associate myself with Ms. Gross's comments and requests. I think COG can play a really pivotal role in this as well. And it just reminded me of the extraordinary conversation we had with Professor Guillen and book 2030, which I've been like talking about all over the place. But I think that's also a nice framing because it gives us the sort of, macro situation that we're facing. And then we can use that to tie it to these particular kinds of efforts. It is difficult sometimes, especially as it was related to this issue of builders and having to make money. I mean, this is not a charity effort necessarily, but I think if we're able to frame it and point to the fact that unless we all come together and leverage whatever we have in place, we're going to fall behind considerably, and that would affect the economy in general. I will also just share in closing that one thing I constantly talk about is going to the rating agencies and having them ask us in Montgomery County, what are you doing in those areas of the county where you don't have a lot of redevelopment or transit, et cetera? How are you going to leverage those areas? And so it is about the bottom line, and it is about the stability of our economies. And but it is important to be able to frame that. And I think what Ms. Gross is saying is on point, and I would really look forward to COG playing a role in that way as well.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other hands. We're a little bit behind on time, so let us move to agenda item 9, the COVID-19 situational update. For this item, DC Health Infectious Disease Epidemiologist Dr. Patrick Edemy will update us on the status of COVID-19 cases in the region. Dr. Edemy, thank you for being with us.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Hi, thank you for having me. So let me go ahead and sort of give you a layperson view of what is happening as we see it in the region. So I prepared this the presentation, so named the Delta Surge Snapshot. Next slide, please. So, so this is, again, the rise of the Delta in the DMV region, and wanted to talk also about something we're going to be seeing in our activities to try to prevent and forecast where the pandemic is going. So we set out to build a regional phylogenetic tree. I'm going to explain a little bit more in a few what that means. Next slide, please. So first, why is COVID-19 virus changing? So the first point here is, so SARS-CoV-19 is an RNA virus. If you don't know it, those are viruses that are very ubiquitous. They are seen a lot in respiratory conditions. And one of the best known is the influenza virus. That is very common. We see that seasonally every year all around the world. Why do we care about the COVID-19 and why is it changing? It is changing because this is a virus. When it multiplies, it makes a lot of error when copying its genetic material inside a cell that it has invaded, so a host cell. So the second point here that I wanted to make quickly is RNA viruses like HIV and influenza virus tend to develop mutations. And so those mutations are errors in the reading of their genetic material into another copies. So when that happens, then we have a mutation in the next generation of the virus. And the rate of the SARS-CoV-19 mutation is usually about 2 single letters mutation per month. And just to understand, how that differs from the other viruses that are well known, it's about 50% lower than that of the influenza and about 75% lower than that of HIV. But why are we seeing more of the COVID around? Is because we have a population that doesn't have a built-in immunity against this. And so when there's a variant, most of the population is basically verging to that new variant, to that new virus. And therefore, we see a lot of cases rising. Next slide, please. So what is a virus variant and why does it matter? I just touched on it earlier. So a virus variant is a sample of the virus, so that differ from the original virus. So the original COVID-19 virus was the first one that was isolated in Wuhan in 2019. So therefore the name of it, and you can see here and bullet point 2 here, the name of the virus as it was named by scientists. So beta-cov Wuhan, and then some other numbers that say exactly where it came from, the first isolated virus. And so when we have a variant, we compare the genetic material. You can see here on the right, the genetic material of the SARS viruses. And you have the first one at the bottom there is SARS-CoV virus that we saw 10 years ago. That was when there was the SARS, if you remember those. And then below it, there's MERS-CoV. They're all coronaviruses, and they affect the respiratory system. And they cause pneumonia, they cause those symptoms that you know. And then at the bottom, you have the 2019 nCoV. That's the one that is the culprit for this pandemic. And I'm not going to bore you with this details here. So this is what geneticists say when they do sequencing. But the take-home message is this portion here where you see S. That S is the portion of the material that encodes the spike protein. So you can see here S for the spike protein. And why is that important? It's important because coronavirus uses that spike protein to invade our cells. And the way it does it, when there's a mutation, if that mutation occurs in the spike protein RNA gene, then you will have a spike protein that can evade and elude the antibody defenses that we have. And so the new variant, even though people may be vaccinated or have had the original COVID-19 virus, they may not have enough defenses, the antibodies to fight against the new variant. And that could explain some of the breakthrough cases that we see around. So I just wanted you to have that in mind. Next slide, please. Then you also have this, why is COVID-19 variant surveillance important during the pandemic? Just so that you know, we do, in most health departments, we do surveillance of the different variants because we need to know what is happening in our communities. So one of the main reasons is why we do variant surveillance is to provide public health officials and policymakers with the intel on which strain of the virus is currently circulating in the community, how virulent it is, and how and where it is spreading. So this is really important to, information that is used to decide what to do next in terms of preventive measures and stuff. Then the next bullet point is just to give you an idea of what variant and how they classified. So when we hear variant of interest, is a new variant that is being seen around in some communities and some countries, and then the CDC and the WHO will then give it that qualification because it's starting to be seen in sample of people that are getting sick, but something that is different from the previous original virus. But when we see a variant that is called variants of concern, like the Delta variant or the Alpha previously, is because we are starting to see more people in our community, in other countries, in our country, that are getting sick. And when they are, the sample is isolated, we see this particular variant, so a new virus that is emerging, and that is also good at evading the defenses of the immune system, or the preventive measures. So that becomes a variant of concern because it's spreading. And it could also mean that variant of concern is affecting the effectiveness of the vaccine. And that's so we've seen that with Delta. Okay, so we haven't seen, thank God, a variant of high consequence. That would be our nightmare. So we don't want to see that probably ever. So that's the worst case scenario where nothing works and that variant is spreading like wildfire. Okay, next slide, please. So let's go over the DMV number, why we're here, and where we were and where we are today. Next slide, please. So just to give you a snapshot, this is more of a visual. I'm not going to talk too much about the numbers. Most of you have seen these numbers, but just to see where we were last year and where we are today. If you look at where we are at the end of August of 2020, so next to July, that will be August, the curve. You see the data from DC, Maryland, and Virginia. And you see the surge that happened, which was the Alpha surge, the Alpha variant surge last winter and fall. And then you see when the cases went down. And now you see this summer when we were doing really well. And suddenly last month, things started to go up again. You can see the curve going up. So we're still rising. And this is Delta, the rise of Delta. So next slide, please. And same thing here with hospitalizations. And you can see that the curve is all the way to September, past July, August, everything is rising again. So something is happening out there. So is a new surge probably happening. Next slide, please. The deaths in the region, you can see a year ago where we were, and it hasn't changed that much this September, end of August, but you can see it's starting to tick up a little bit. So hopefully it won't rise, but what we know is that the reason why this hasn't gone up that much is because people are being vaccinated. So we vaccinate over 50%, 60% in some jurisdictions of the population. That is keeping the death rate low for COVID, because vaccination does protect against hospitalization and against severe disease and death. Okay, next slide, please. Just wanted to give you a snapshot of the vaccine numbers in the area. And so we currently have, most jurisdictions have done really well. I know DC is about 68% of people that have received at least one shot. Fully vaccinated, 58%, same thing with Virginia. Maryland's at 62%. So these are data that we got from yesterday. So our DMV region is doing much better than most part of the country. So I think we should be happy, not satisfied, obviously, because a lot more people need to be vaccinated. And we should encourage them to get the vaccine because it does protect against hospitalization and death and severe disease. So that's a take-home message there. Next slide, please. So just to acknowledge the organization and foundation that helped us with the DMV Phylogenetic project. You can see that there. Next slide, please. And this is the phylogenetic tree, and this is a little bit too technical, but the take-home message here is when we have variants, or like right now we're doing surveillance in the region, a lot of the labs, like our DCPHL lab, we are sequencing the samples of the people that are getting sick. And those samples are then sent to a database that is a global database where you see the different number, the different variant here on the left that are being followed and surveilled. And then there is a tree like that show the different generation of the virus all the way. So you go all the way up here where the green is, that's Delta. And you can see, just to see how concentrated that is, those are the new number just last month and the month before. So you can see how Delta is now bigger than the blue here. That's Alpha, that's B1117. And so Delta has taken over in the new cases that we see in the region. And this is for DMV, so all the three jurisdictions. So next slide, please. And this is another graph that basically shows the takeover of Delta, the rise of Delta. And on the blue here, look at the months. Back in January, where we were, that was the beginning of Alpha B117, and how it went. It was up. That was the surge last winter and fall. And then we had the spring, things got better. Early summer, and here's the rise of Delta. And you can see how that color has now overtaken 98% of the new cases, pretty much, that we sample and sequence are Delta. So that's what you need to remember. We're now facing the Delta surge. Next slide, please. Just some acknowledgement, and I want to thank the different health department and also the COG, Jenny, for making this possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adamy. Really want to thank you for sharing your insights, and I want to open it up for questions if anyone has questions for Dr. Adamy.
Chairman, this is
Yeah.
Beverly. I have one question. In Dr. Edelman's chart, and when he showed the number of people vaccinated through the region, when he talked about it in terms of percentages of population. I think that chart shows the number of people. And so the District of Columbia looked as if it was far out of sync with the rest of the region. But I think it was because it was shown in numbers and not percentages. So visually, I just have to be a little protective and say, in the future, I hope that you can depict that in percentages so that we will look like we're in sync with everyone else.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Perry. Yeah, that I didn't really have a lot of time to look at to explain. The numbers are there. The percentage is also buried in there in the data, but the numbers out. So you can see that those numbers show, for example, Virginia has about 10 million shots administered.
Yeah,
but that's
and
proportional
so
to
you got
the
a high bar, and
correct.
you have showed,
And
yes,
exactly.
that's my point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's why I mentioned the percentage rather than the numbers. So
I know, but the visual depiction looked skewed.
right. I that's a great point.
Okay.
It's also because we are a jurisdiction district, so so when you show the numbers, it would say 900,000, for example, shot administered, but you're talking about 58-60% of the population that has received shots. So
I got you.
that's
I
still on
got you.
par with exactly with the other states. Yes.
Okay.
In the region.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if you don't mind, I'd like to go a little bit off of the presentation, but ask a question that I think several people have asked me, and I think it is important. As they ask, as we're doing the vaccination, does it matter if people mix the vaccines that they take? For example, if someone takes the Moderna or the Pfizer or whatever we're looking at, does it make a difference if they, for example, they're talking about potentially booster shot? Does it make a difference on how consistent one is with the type of vaccine that they've originally taken?
So I'm just going to talk about what the CDC recommendation is.
Okay.
I've heard what you just mentioned, Mayor Adams. There are some scientists that in the medical community and public health community that are talking about the fact that it is possible to mix the type of vaccine that one receive, but the recommendation of the CDC is that you stay. If you got Pfizer, please get another shot of Pfizer. If you got Moderna, please get Moderna. And Moderna is not approved yet for booster, but only Pfizer is. So I guess by doing one of those approval only at this point, if people that have gotten Moderna earlier, they need to get a booster, they may have to get the Pfizer because that's the only one approved for booster.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Hi, Mr. Chair, Dave Snyder, a question. What percentage of the hospitalizations and fatalities are unvaccinated people? And isn't part of what we're seeing now, an incredible tool that was developed is not being adequately used, and that's really causing, and that tool, I mean, is vaccination. So could you comment on the percentage of hospitalizations and vaccinations hospitalizations and fatalities that are by unvaccinated people.
And Dr. Edemy, I'm going to ask you politely to be brief because I got to make sure we have enough people for a vote that we have to take later.
Okay, sure. I don't have the exact numbers for that, but what we know, what we've seen from the CDC data is clearly there is an overwhelming number of unvaccinated people that are hospitalized, and is also reflected in the deaths. It's overwhelming. Just looking at states where you see more of that is happening. It's not from the CDC data, yes.
Thank you very much. And I do want to thank you again for all your work in the district and beyond. So thank you for being with us today, Dr. Edemy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thanks.
So finally, we will move to our last agenda item number 10, establishing a regional food security work program and committee. For this item, we'll continue our conversation from the COG leadership retreat on establishing a permanent food and agriculture regional member or farm policy committee and approving a regional fund to support this work program. The Farm Committee leadership joined us at the retreat to share the great work they're doing, and the board participated in a detailed discussion about the importance of continuing this essential work in our region. Thank you to Council Members Che, Craig Rice, and John Staley for their leadership on the committee this past year. We also want to share our appreciation to several of our colleagues on the board and from around the region for lending their expertise and engagement to Farm's work. Now I'm going to turn it over to Vice Chair of the Farm Committee, Councilmember Staley, for a few brief remarks and to answer any additional question board members may have. The board will then consider Resolution R35-2021, approving the establishment of a standing farm policy committee and a food security work program and regional fund. So with that, let me turn it over to Mr. Staley.
Well, thank you, Chair White. I appreciate the opportunity to be here on behalf of our chair, Councilmember Che, and Vice Chair, Councilmember Craig Rice. You gave a wonderful intro that was most of the talking points I was provided as well, so I can catch us up on some time very rapidly. I am pleased to be here today when the power is on and no band is playing in the background like it was the last time I joined you all. So we'll try and get this as it moves forward. Really excited to be here today. When we had the chance to share at the board retreat our progress that we made in this previous year, the support that you all shared and the energy in that room has me still energized today. We know the pandemic has created incredible strains in our community, and many of our residents are disproportionately impacted. This crisis has exacerbated the issue of food insecurity, and it's more than hunger, as you all know. It's insufficient connections to our region. It's about connecting back to the farmers and the food that we eat. It's about the land. It is that public health emergency that has highlighted something that is there, has revealed and shown that has even worsened over time. So we're here today because we know we need sustained regional action to address this issue on what we can do together, how we can help each other most, and most importantly, how we can help our communities. I've got a list of items that we've accomplished to date, but it is in your board packet as well. I'll highlight a few of them. We're looking at ongoing state and local investments in food security and how we may be able to use federal relief funds. Again, this is information sharing as it comes together. A compendium of healthy food access policies across DC, Maryland, Virginia. We have some joint sessions coming up, including with the Chesapeake Bay and Water Resources Policy Committee on land access for farmers identifying as Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and continue to work on our local governments and partners to develop a regional food system database. There's more in your packet. I would encourage jurisdictions to join us. Thank you to those who are part of our committee or who are here today. I saw a few of you here earlier and then had to jump off as well. And with that, Chair, I'm happy to take any questions that may exist.
Thank you very much, Mr. Staley. I want to see if there are any questions from my COG board colleagues before we vote on the resolution. Yes, Ms. Briskman.
Thank you. I don't so much have a question, just a comment. I really appreciate this work, and I was extremely intrigued by Councilwoman Che's example of the farming and gardening that she did at the schools.
we had sort of a false start with that in Loudoun County. And so I sit on the Joint School Board Committee, and I plan to bring that as an initiative. And hopefully with the support of the Farm Committee, we can get it started again in Loudoun County. I would also really love to see the Loudoun County farms and rural Loudoun engaged on this committee. I know that Tia Walbridge, who chairs our farm committee, is on this. And so hoping, we can get a tour of Loudoun farms in the mix here and get some of our Loudoun products at our next regional retreat, because it was really enjoyable. And I appreciate all the work that everybody is doing. And I fully support this. And I will make comments about it at our board meeting tonight when we do our regional updates. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Yes, Ms. Randall.
Mr. Chairman, we're going to vote right now on the regional funding, right? And so all the jurisdictions. Okay. So it going on with Ms. Brixman said, Loudoun County will fully support this, and I'm sure we will. However, we haven't had a board meeting since the retreat. And so the item hasn't come up on our agenda. So I would actually probably abstain on the vote, because I don't want to commit even a small amount of money on behalf of the county without having taken the item to our board first. And we haven't done, tonight is our first meeting after the August break. And so after the meeting in our retreat, we haven't been back on the dais. And so it's not that Loudoun has any trouble with the money. We can, that will all happen, but I don't feel like I should vote on committing money before I take it to my board first.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Mr. Chairman, this is Penny Gross. To pile on to what Phyllis just said, this may be the only time that we're sort of out of cycle from a budgetary standpoint, trying to do something new at COG. But I know I got a little pushback from my county executive about this out of cycle request. I certainly will support this, but I understand Phyllis's point, and I think COG needs to be a little more cognizant in the future of this challenge of the timing for something like this, because if we have to explain to our county managers and our county executives about the work that we're doing, and it's a small amount, but if it's rubbing people the wrong way, it's not a good start. So I just wanted to point that out, that it is an out of cycle request, and we're getting a little bit of pushback on it. Thanks.
Thank you for that.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair, Dave Snyder. I want to associate myself with the prior two comments. A similar situation for us, so I'll be abstaining from this. I support the overall effort. I also have concerns that the funding is not based on a per capita basis the way we usually do funding, but is sort of on a grouping basis, which means that some jurisdictions on a per capita basis would pay too much and others would pay too little. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other questions?
Mr. Chairman, this is Chair Randall one more time. If this is not completely time sensitive, if we could table the issue until our next meeting, which would give everyone a chance to go back and have at least one meeting on their boards. And I mean, literally, it's not a large amount of money, and I know that there's nobody in my county that would disagree. It just hasn't gone to the boards yet. So if we could table it for one cycle, for one COG meeting, I think people would have time and to go back to their respective bodies and present it to them and then bring it back.
Yeah, that's fair. Mr. Bean, is there a time sensitivity here that would prevent us from tabling this until the next meeting?
The rationale for bringing it up now was to get the program started. It is out of cycle, and I do recognize the comments made by the members. So I think it's really going to go with a coalition of the willing during this FY22, And I think what I'm hearing is there's going to be more broad, maybe perhaps unanimity support for FY23. So I think it's Chairman, your and the executive committee's decision to table it till October. I think in either case it'll be a coalition of the willing, at least in FY22.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Staley.
We are happy to come back next month and would much rather have folks very comfortable moving forward. We will continue our work, and I am happy to come back to you all later on and update you on what more accomplishments we've made over the next month, so you're even more excited to support it. So if that helps the group forward, we're happy to support that.
I appreciate it. It seems like it would be best if we do table this until next month. We certainly don't want to lose or jeopardize support from jurisdictions that certainly want to be a part of this and want to be seen as a part of this. So, Mr. Beat, I guess we propose that we will table this until next month. We've had the presentation. We probably can truncate that process, and I think this is something we can probably move through pretty easily next month.
So if you need a formal motion, Mr. Chair, I would make that motion if you need a formal motion.
I appreciate it. Do we need a motion to table?
Yes, sir, you do.
Thank you very much. Well, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second, Supervisor Briskman.
Thank you. Any no votes or abstentions? And this is on a motion to table resolution R35-2021 until the October meeting. All right, hearing no votes and no abstentions, the motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Moving to agenda item 11, other business. Is there any additional business that we have not covered today?
Mr. Chairman, this is Chair Randall again. Last time I talk, I promise. Before January 6th, I asked all of my colleagues in COG to encourage their residents to not go to DC to counter protest. And I was very grateful that almost all of the jurisdictions did that, put something out that said, please do not go down to Washington, D.C. to do a counter protest. I'm going to make that just request again for September 18th. There's supposed to be another demonstration on September 18th, and I would make the request, or maybe not request, maybe the suggestion that there are no counter protests. People don't normally come in from Idaho to counter protests, but they will come from the COG region. So I would hope that we would encourage our residents once again to not go counter protest on September 18th. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Any additional announcements or business? All right, hearing none, I want to thank everyone for joining us and participating in the COG Board of Directors meeting for this month. The next COG Board meeting is scheduled to be in person on October 13th, 2021. Again, COVID pending. So if there's a change of status, we will let you know. But hopefully we will see each other in person in a month. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Supervisor Briskman.
Thank you. And is there a second?
Second, Chairman.
Wonderful. Hearing a motion in a second. Are there any abstentions or nay votes? Hearing none. We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of the day.
Bye, everyone. See you next month.
Bye. Stay safe, everyone.